The summer of 1857 in northern India was unusually hot, yet the air carried more than just the scent of parched earth. In the barracks of Meerut, discontent simmered among the sepoys of the East India Company's army. For years, they had endured discrimination, delayed pay, and cultural insensitivity from British officers, and rumors of new cartridges greased with cow and pig fat, a grave violation of religious beliefs, pushed them to the breaking point. On the 10th of May, that simmering anger erupted. Mutiny spread like wildfire through Meerut as soldiers rose against their colonial masters. By dawn, they had stormed the town, killing officers and their families. Ordinary villagers and disaffected civilians joined, seizing weapons and declaring their resistance to foreign rule. But would this spark ignite a larger flame, or would it be extinguished before it spread across India? News traveled quickly along the Ganges plains. In Delhi, the aged Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar was suddenly thrust back into a world of politics and war. The sepoys declared him the symbolic leader of the revolt, hoping that rallying around the last vestige of the Mughal dynasty would unite disparate regions. Across the countryside, zamindars, peasants, and artisans began forming bands of resistance, reclaiming local authority from company officials, and yet, not all rulers were swayed. Powerful dynasties, including the Scindias of Gwalior and the Holkars of Indore, remained loyal to the British, fearing the collapse of order and the loss of their own privileges. How could a rebellion flourish when so many influential players remained neutral or opposed? The rebels' courage was undeniable. In cities like Kanpur, Jhansi, and Lucknow, men and women seized arms, marched through narrow streets, and defied the guns and discipline of the company's trained army. But they faced grave challenges. Most still wielded outdated muskets, swords, and lances. Leadership was fragmented, and strategies were improvised on the fly. Communication between regions was slow, and coordination often broke down under pressure. And yet, every act of defiance fueled a growing legend that ordinary men and women, armed with nothing but determination, could stand against the mightiest imperial power on earth. Could this disparate movement ever overcome the sheer military and financial advantage of the British? By mid-June, uprisings had erupted across northern India, though southern, eastern, and western regions remained largely untouched. Local populations reacted cautiously. Some watched the revolt with fear, others with hope. In rural villages, small groups of armed villagers cut off company tax collectors, freed imprisoned peasants, and disrupted supply lines. Cities like Delhi became powder kegs, buzzing with rumors of conspiracies and secret councils plotting the downfall of colonial authority. Yet the British were not idle. Reinforcements were dispatched from Calcutta and Bombay, and news of brutal reprisals began to trickle into rebel-held areas. Could the rebellion withstand the inevitable counterstrike? Amid the chaos, stories of heroism began to circulate. Young officers deserted their posts to join the rebellion. Peasant women carried water and weapons to barricaded towns. Elders advised on tactics rooted in centuries of local warfare. And somewhere in the shadows of Delhi, Bahadur Shah Zafar, the elderly emperor, walked the streets quietly, wondering if he could bear the weight of leading a revolt he never sought. But even as courage swelled, cracks began to appear. Rivalries between rebel leaders, disputes over strategy, and the challenge of supplying hundreds of thousands of fighters hinted that this uprising could either transform India forever or collapse under its own weight. If you're captivated by the story of India's first mass uprising, make sure to subscribe and like the video. Your support helps more people discover the incredible history hidden in these pages. Because as the fires of rebellion spread from Meerut to Delhi and beyond, the stage was being set for battles that would decide the fate of a nation. And yet, the British, with their trained troops and vast resources, were preparing a counter-strike that would shock the rebels to their core. Who would survive and who would be crushed in the first real test of courage against empire? The city of Delhi had become a fortress overnight. Narrow lanes, ancient gates, and crumbling walls echoed with the cries of soldiers and civilians alike. For the rebels, Delhi was more than a city, it was a symbol, a rallying point under the banner of Bahadur Shah Zafar. Yet, on the 28th of September 1857, the East India Company's forces, led by General John Nicholson, stormed the city with precision and ruthless determination. The rebels fought valiantly, barricading streets, firing from rooftops, and refusing to yield an inch. But even as cannons roared and smoke enveloped the city, a grim realization dawned: Delhi would fall. Would the heart of the rebellion be crushed before it could inspire the rest of India? The fall of Delhi sent shockwaves far beyond the city walls. Bahadur Shah Zafar was captured, his sons and loyal nobles executed in cold blood, and the Mughal dynasty, already weakened, was finally brought to its knees. Yet the flames of rebellion refused to die. Thousands of rebels scattered across northern India, carrying the spirit of revolt with them. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib orchestrated one of the most intense defenses of the uprising, rallying soldiers and civilians alike, determined to avenge Delhi's fall. The air was thick with tension. Every street could conceal a sniper, every river crossing a trap. Could the rebels withstand the relentless pursuit of the British Army, whose discipline and firepower seemed limitless? In central India, Tatya Tope became a shadow across the countryside, waging guerrilla campaigns with unmatched ingenuity. Cavalry units struck British supply lines, ambushed reinforcements, and vanished into forests and hills, leaving the enemy bewildered. Meanwhile, in Jhansi, Rani Lakshmibai, the warrior queen, prepared her forces for a defense that would become legendary. Mounted on her horse, she drilled her troops day and night, determined to protect her city from the advancing company army. Stories of her courage traveled hundreds of miles, inspiring young and old alike, yet the specter of overwhelming British force loomed. Could even the indomitable Rani withstand the tide of imperial might? As the months dragged on, the rebels faced another harsh reality. They were battling not just an army, but an empire armed with immense wealth, modern artillery, and a global network of reinforcements. Every rebel victory was met with a calculated British counterattack. Villages that had joined the uprising were burned, their populations punished, and the message was clear: resistance would come at a staggering cost. Yet, amidst these brutal reprisals, acts of heroism emerged. Ordinary villagers guided soldiers through secret routes. Women disguised themselves as men to fight. Children carried messages across enemy lines. And as each skirmish unfolded, the question hung heavy in the air: how long could the rebellion survive under such merciless pressure? The struggle extended beyond battlefields. Communication, supplies, and morale were constant challenges. Rebel leaders argued over strategy, mistrust crept into alliances. Desertion and famine tested the commitment of even the bravest fighters. Still, the rebels adapted. Tatya Tope's guerrilla warfare stretched British forces thin, forcing Nicholson and other commanders to divide their troops across vast territories. And in every town and village, whispers of rebellion, of revenge for Delhi and defiance of the East India Company kept hope alive. But with every clash, the cost mounted. Could unity and courage alone counter the full might of a colonial power? Even as the British tightened their grip, Rani Lakshmibai's forces launched a daring counterattack, striking at enemy garrisons and reclaiming lost ground. Her cavalry thundered through Jhansi's streets, every sword lifted a defiance against oppression. Tatya Tope continued to harass supply lines, his movements becoming almost mythical in their unpredictability. But as winter approached, fatigue, dwindling supplies, and disease began to take their toll. The rebels' bravery was unmatched, yet the empire's machinery of war was relentless. The ultimate question loomed: could the rebellion survive another season of warfare, or was the hour of reckoning near? By early 1858, the tides of war had shifted irreversibly. The British, with reinforcements pouring from across the empire, systematically closed in on rebel strongholds. Cities that had once thrummed with the energy of defiance now echoed with the sounds of retreat and despair. In Jhansi, Rani Lakshmibai, mounted on her white horse, rallied her troops one last time. She fought not just for a city, but for a vision of a free India, Yet she knew the empire's forces were vast and merciless. Could even her legendary courage withstand the siege that was closing in from all sides? Outside Jhansi, Tatya Tope led a guerrilla army of hundreds, moving like shadows through forests and hills. Each skirmish struck the British with precision, yet every victory came at a cost. Supplies dwindled, men grew exhausted, and morale wavered. The rebels' decentralized leadership, once a strength that allowed flexibility, now became a liability as coordination faltered. Meanwhile, news reached the scattered rebels that Delhi had fallen months earlier, and with it, Bahadur Shah Zafar imprisoned and humiliated. The realization was chilling. The heart of their movement had been shattered. How long could hope endure in the face of relentless, crushing power? In the summer of 1858, the final battles began to claim India's greatest heroes. On the 17th of June, Rani Lakshmibai rode into battle at Gwalior, leading a small but fearless force against overwhelming odds. Contemporary accounts describe her charging with sword raised, rallying her soldiers even as bullets tore through the ranks. Her death was both tragic and emblematic. The Queen of Jhansi fell in combat, her body carried from the field, leaving behind a legend that would inspire generations. Across central India, Tatya Tope continued to fight, but the British relentless pursuit left no refuge. Captured on the 15th of April 1859, he was executed, a brilliant strategist and tireless patriot struck down before his time. Could any leader survive the full weight of imperial vengeance? Other leaders faced similar fates. Kunwar Singh of Bihar, though aged and ill, commanded campaigns that inflicted serious damage on the company's forces. The Begums of Awadh orchestrated defenses in Lucknow, defying gender norms to assert political and military authority. Khan Bahadur led local resistance in parts of northern India. Yet, one by one, their cities fell, their forces scattered, and their dreams of victory extinguished. Rebellion, it seemed, could not overcome the combined machinery of the British Army and its allies. But even in defeat, acts of valor and sacrifice lit a flame that no execution or surrender could fully snuff out. The end of the revolt was not just a military conclusion, it was a moral reckoning. Villages were razed, civilians punished, and stories of brutality sent shockwaves across the subcontinent. Yet, the heroism of 1857 could not be erased. Tales of Rani Lakshmibai's charge, Tatya Tope's guerrilla maneuvers, and the defiance of ordinary men and women were whispered from village to village, crossing rivers and hills, igniting hearts with courage long after the last musket had fallen silent. Could the sacrifices of these individuals shape India's consciousness for decades to come? Even as the smoke cleared and the British declared the revolt suppressed, the spirit of 1857 lingered in the hearts of Indians. The rebellion had failed in immediate terms, but it had succeeded in proving a point: the people of India could unite, fight, and challenge a seemingly invincible empire. If you're moved by the courage of these heroes, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Your support helps ensure that the stories of bravery, sacrifice, and resistance reach more people around the world. And yet, even as the world moved on, the lessons of the revolt were only beginning to reshape the British administration and, eventually, India's long struggle for freedom. The guns fell silent, and the smoke of battle cleared, but the echoes of 1857 reverberated across the subcontinent. The East India Company's grip on India had survived the rebellion, but it emerged profoundly shaken. The British realized that governing through commerce alone was no longer sufficient. They needed direct control, with tighter administrative oversight and a stronger military presence. The Government of India Act of 1858 officially transferred power from the company to the British Crown, ushering in a new era of colonial governance. Yet beneath these legal and structural changes lay a deeper, more enduring impact: the undeniable proof that Indians could rise in unified resistance. The army, once the backbone of company rule, was thoroughly restructured. European soldiers were increased in number, regiments were reorganized along communal and regional lines, and loyalty was rewarded while suspicion was codified. Soldiers from regions heavily involved in the revolt, Bengal, Awadh, and parts of northern India were deliberately excluded from recruitment. Meanwhile, martial races such as Gurkhas and Pathans were favored, reflecting the British obsession with controlling who could wield arms. These measures were practical, but they were also a reminder that rebellion had consequences beyond the battlefield. Could such systemic changes prevent future uprisings, or merely sow the seeds of deeper resentment? For the people of India, the revolt left a profound emotional and cultural imprint. Rani Lakshmibai became more than a warrior queen. She became a symbol of courage, defiance, and women's empowerment. Tatya Tope's name traveled far and wide, representing strategic brilliance and unwavering commitment to freedom. Ordinary villagers and soldiers who had stood against impossible odds were remembered in songs, stories, and oral traditions. In every town where the sepoys had marched, in every village that had resisted, a legacy of defiance and resilience endured. Could these stories of valor inspire generations yet to come, long after the battlefield had been abandoned? The revolt also reshaped political awareness across India. Local rulers who had supported the British were rewarded, but those who hesitated or wavered observed the cost of rebellion firsthand. Intellectuals, poets, and reformers began to interpret 1857 not simply as a failed mutiny, but as the first collective assertion of Indian identity against foreign domination. It was no longer enough to submit quietly to colonial authority. The narrative of heroism and resistance became a moral compass for future generations, shaping the consciousness that would eventually fuel the independence movement decades later. Could the sacrifices of 1857 plant the seeds that would one day grow into a free nation? Even today, the memory of 1857 continues to resonate. Monuments and memorials honor the fallen, museums preserve the artifacts of battle. Literature and cinema retell the stories of courage, betrayal, and sacrifice. The revolt became a touchstone for Indian nationalism, demonstrating that unity, courage, and sacrifice could challenge the most powerful empire of the era. And though the rebellion itself failed to achieve immediate political freedom, it achieved something equally vital. It proved that the dream of independence was not only possible, but inevitable. The 1857 revolt was no ordinary uprising. It was a crucible of heroism, strategy, and human endurance. It was a rebellion fought not just with weapons, but with ideals, courage, and the unyielding belief in freedom. From Delhi to Jhansi, from Kanpur to the forests of central India, the story of 1857 reminds us that even against overwhelming odds, ordinary people can rise to extraordinary heights. And as we reflect on this chapter of history, we understand why the flames of revolt, though extinguished in the immediate moment, continue to inspire the hearts of millions to this very day.